You don't need a stage. You need a chair and the guts to tell the truth. I don't have all the answers. I'm still sorting out my own. But I've learned that when we name something, we drag it into the light, and it doesn't own us the same way anymore. This is for anyone else who's tired of bluffing and just wants to name what's real while we build. Most weeks it's me, sometimes a guest. Always becoming, always honest. This is no stage, just a chair. I always start with a story, and for this time, I want to start with a different kind of story. The thought and the idea and the story that I want to share is a little bit of why I'm trying to do this, a little bit of why I'm having these conversations, because I've had a few friends that ask me what does success look like with this podcast, with these thoughts that I'm sharing. And I think that I've realized that a lot of what I think is success is in the process of doing it. It's not in likes, it's not in reach, it's not in engagement, it's not in comments, it's not in followers, it's not in all those things. It is, the metric is different. And the metric is different, and it's caused me to reevaluate a few things. Not about what I'm doing, but remind me that the things that we put as metrics and the things we put as winning sometimes don't line up with what is the actual worth. Because if winning is tied to our worth, then when we lose, it feels like the end of the world. And when we lose, it feels like the bottom has dropped out of everything, instead of it being a moment, instead of it being part of the process, instead of it being part of legitimately growing and becoming what it is that we want to be. And part of why I think about that, and the best analogy that I came up with for it, the thing that I've always thought about and I've watched for the last few years, I've commented on here several times. I'm a big Thunder fan. I'm an Oklahoma City guy. And I look back at the rebuild that the Thunder did. And I can remember that there was a writer who labeled the Thunder the black eye of the league, because they were tanking and they were losing, and the path that they used and the path that they took in order to get to where they are today felt backwards. Because we had a good team. We were making the playoffs. This was good enough for a lot of organizations. We were making the playoffs. We had all-star players. We had Russell Westbrook. We had Paul George. We had enough to be good. But we were also enough to be a first-round exit every year. And we wanted more, and the players wanted more. And Paul George had an opportunity to play with Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers. So he asked for a trade. Sam Presti went and did a Sam Presti thing, and he traded Paul George for Gallinari, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and a boatload of picks. And I know that there are a lot of people that looked at that trade at the time, and some thought it was a great trade for everybody involved. Some thought it was foolishness because we traded a star for a bunch of pieces. But our GM saw the vision. And he saw the player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that he thought that we could build around, because he carried the DNA. We didn't know how good he was going to be. We didn't know that he was going to be an MVP. We didn't know that he was going to be a scoring champion. We didn't know that he was going to be as much as he's become, we didn't know. But we knew he fit the DNA. And we knew that he fit the idea of players, of people over players. So as Oklahoma City went backward, as they went from playoff and they went from not really contenders, but a team, a respectable team in the league, and tore it all down to the studs. There had to be some patience and resilience in that. And resilience is probably the best word. I hadn't even thought about that. I hadn't written that down, but resilience is really the right word. Because resilience is the thing that gets you through. And it gets you through when you really believe in what it is that you're doing. Because as they tore it all down, the scoreboard said failure. The win-loss record said failure. But the culture said foundation. And hindsight is 2020. But we can look at it now in October of 2025 and see that they just won the world championship. And I think I'm pretty reasonably confident in saying that our GM was right. And lots of people doubted. People panicked. People around the league questioned it. We didn't sell out the arena all the time. We didn't have as much attendance. There wasn't as much buzz. And people wondered how long it would be. And somehow in 2025, we're hoisting a banner. And we're hoisting a banner because there was resilience and confidence and patience in the process between where we were and where we wanted to be. That wasn't about the scoreboard and wasn't about the metrics. And it really was about worth and value. Years later, the wins followed. And I want to be really clear whenever I say this. This is not about throwing out the numbers. This is not about ignoring metrics. This is about putting metrics in its right place. Because there's a lot of the time that we put metrics number one and culture and value number two. And when we put metrics number one, then we prioritize numbers over everything else. Numbers over everything else is not sustainable. So think of it this way. Measure the numbers, but remember what they are proof of. Remember what they are proof of. I have this conversation with my kids pretty regularly. I'm really lucky. Both my kids are pretty smart. They get good grades. And the conversation that I have with them about grades isn't, I demand perfection. The conversation that I have with them is, I expect them to give their best. I just expect them to give their best. It changes the way that they approach it. It changes the way that they approach learning. It changes the way they approach performance. How do we adjust how we address performance? How do we address that? How do we think differently about it? Because the truth is, and this is the thing, before we even started this podcast, talking with my friend Taylor here about how there are so many things going right now, but the life feels a little manic, feels a little crazy. And in it feeling crazy, I could either focus on the things that don't feel quite settled, or I can look at it and go, there's so much good happening that I want to lean into that I want to think about that I want to focus on that. Because the good things that are happening are the things that have worth. Does that make sense? I want to focus on the things that have worth. When I look at the metrics, and this is where I started from the very beginning of this podcast. When I'm looking at the metrics, I'm looking at this podcast and I'm saying, right now, I'm not focused on numbers. I'm not focused on followers. I'm not focused on engagement. I'm not focused on views. I'm not focused on clicks. I'm not focused on all those things. I'm focused on the process because there's going to be growth in the process. The first podcast to the second podcast to the third podcast to this is episode 9. There's growth that's been in that. And I've been surprised at some of the things that have actually been higher performing because they've surprised me. I thought there were clips that I thought were going to do great and clips that I thought were kind of throwaways, and then all of a sudden I see that they're the ones that everybody connects to. They're the ones that get likes. They're the ones that get all those things, and it causes me to stop and go, what are the things of worth that were in there? Are these metrics shining a light on what's valuable? Does that make sense? And I'll be honest, I know that there's like this kind of back and forth that's even going on in my head as I'm talking about this, because there is this tension of metrics and winning versus worth. There are these tensions, and a lot of the episode, like a lot of the things that I've been thinking about right now, live in that tension. I talked earlier about Stephen Wilson Jr. and how he lives in that tension of life is good, or God is good, but life is twisted. He lives in that tension. And in that tension, we have to kind of find where the pendulum swings to. Because I don't want to think just about that life is hard. And I don't want to just think about that life is good. I don't want to just think about that. I want to live in that middle place that it always is in the tension of the two. So in this moment, it's like when something outperforms, what's my takeaway? What do I need to learn? When something underperforms, what's my takeaway? What do I need to learn? And in all of that, the thing I want to mine for is not approval. What I want to mine for is value. I'm not looking for everybody to tell me good boy. I'm looking for something that after I say it, I look at it and go, that's exactly what I meant. I watched this show called, I think it's called Vikings. As you can tell, I'm a very Scandinavian looking person. And I watched this show called Vikings, and I learned about this thing that I didn't realize was a thing. It's called a sunstone. And one of the things that happens is whenever you're on the water, you navigate by the sun and by the stars and by the moon, because those are the things that are landmarks that are far enough away that you can actually guide by them. The problem is on the cloudy days. The problem is on the dark days. The problem is on the, metaphorically speaking, the difficult days. And they discovered this stone that on cloudy days, on overcast days, on dreary days, on dark days, on down days, they could hold up this stone and find the sun. They could find it. I don't even know how it works, but I know that it works. And what they would do is they would hold up this stone, they would find the sun, and they would navigate by it. It was their fail-safe. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about worth. What is your fail-safe? What is the thing that is your rudder, the thing that is your guiding light, the thing that is your North Star, the thing that is your sun and moon and determining factor that you can fall back on in every difficult moment? Because in the middle of a rebuild for the Thunder, they had to look at it and go, who are we? And what do we want to be? And it's not about winning today. It's about winning for the next decade. I will take short-term losses for long-term wins. I will lose for a year. I will lose for 2 years in order to be contenders for a decade. This is the repositioning and the reset that says, what is our worth and our value? So what is the thing that we hold up? And not only is what is the thing that we hold up, but I also have this other kind of word picture for you that I want to share. As I said, I played music for about 15 years for a living, but I started playing piano when I was 4 years old. And one of the things that happens when you play piano is you practice every day. My piano teacher, I would practice for 30 minutes, and my mom would set a little kitchen timer, a cooking timer, on the top of the piano, and she would set it for 30 minutes, and I would sit down and I would play for 30 minutes. And one of the things that I would do is it's called scales and cadences. Scales and cadences are repetition. They are just doing the same thing. And I would spend about 10 minutes doing that, and then I would spend 20 to 30 minutes playing through the music that my teacher had assigned to me for that week. It never made any sense why I did scales and cadences. I didn't understand it. Until I'm sitting in a studio in Nashville, Tennessee, in a songwriting session with an artist, and they start talking about the chords that they can use in the song, and all of a sudden, this thing in the back of my lizard brain says, hey, instead of the minor 2, we can use the minor 6. And these things that were just planted there by repetition and muscle memory, because they were good activities, those scales, those cadences, all of a sudden became really useful. And not only that, here's an even clearer picture of it. If you put me in a pitch black room and you told me I needed to find middle C at a piano, I could find it 100 out of 100. There's no doubt in my mind I could find middle C in a pitch black room on the first try. And I can do that because I've spent about 20,000 hours sitting at a piano. They say 10,000 hours is the determiner of what an expert is. I've probably spent in excess of 20,000 hours at a piano. And as a result, I can find middle C on the first try in a pitch black room. So between the sunstone, the thing that we hold up that it says, this is our worth, this is our priority, these are the things that we're prioritizing, and also the rituals and routines that we put in place because they're good habits, because they're the right things, because of all that. Whenever we do those things and we combine those two together, they are the cheat code to winning and worth. They're the cheat code to winning and worth, because it helps us find truth. It helps us find the things that are valuable. Because values are more valuable than metrics. And it doesn't mean metrics are valueless. They have value. But values trump them. Metrics drive performance. Meaning drives endurance. If all we're focused on is performance, then in the day that we fail, in the day that we underperform, in the day that isn't our day, that's not the day that we're losers. That just wasn't our day. And in that moment, our worth is the thing that drives us forward. We've talked about this so much that I'm only going to say it once. Short-term success is not as good as long-term alignment. So the question that I ask you, as you discover, as you define your worth, as you define your value, as you define what your sunstone is, as you define what your rituals and routines are, as you define these things, how do we build a scorecard, a scoreboard, metrics that reflect those values, that drive us ahead into what actually leaves us full? Does that make sense? What leaves us full? Because when metrics disappear, and the meaning is the only compass that you have left, then you see how reliant you are on your sunstone, your worth, your value. So as you journey, as you explore, as you learn, as you grow, as you build your company, what I want for myself more than anything else is that I don't lose myself as I search for success. I don't want to lose myself as I search for success. I'm going to stop there. This is where I say it messy, before you assume that it was tidy all along. See you next week.